many mutants is too many mutants? Well, if you ask me, there's no such thing as too many mutants. Motto of the creators behind X-Men 97's second season, where we had a plethora of different kinds of mutants. And although not everyone got the same kind of spotlight, there are many from the second season who are downright mind-blowing. Some may transform into explosive dust, while others may release the energy they absorb or have their entire bodies be permanently changed. And this video is exactly what we're going to discuss. The 10 most unique mutants in X-Men 97 Season 2. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we?
Wolfsbane. After the Sentinel attack organized and led by Bastion in Season 1 of X-Men 97, most of the X-Men were presumed dead, and to fill the power vacuum, the US government sanctioned Valerie Cooper to form a team called X-Factor, which was supposed to protect the remaining mutants, especially the kids, but instead they were simply rounding up these guys and detaining them in a helicarrier in order to keep them off the streets, that too in confinement with power suppressant collars. Wolfsbane was one of the X-Factor members, along with others like Polaris, Multiple Man, and Strong Guy. As a member of X-Factor, Wolfsbane remained dedicated to their cause, even if it meant confining young children against their will in the name of safety and security. In fact, in the 6th episode of Season 2, titled Danger.exe, one could see her in a towel and walking past Polaris and Havoc. Now, these two instances go against who Wolfsbane really is in the comics. In the comics, Rain Sinclair had a religious upbringing and often showed some degree of discomfort about her sexuality. So the comic book Sinclair would possibly not wrap herself only in a towel and roam around others in locker rooms. But more importantly, she would never really hurt children or have a hand in hurting them, especially since she herself had a tough childhood, thanks to her overbearing zealot dad who later joined the Purifiers. I personally think that much like many other mutants who were not part of the X-Men, Wolfsbane remained an underutilized character. Quite a missed opportunity if you ask me. As for her powers, she could transform into a werewolf at will, while retaining her human intelligence, or at least some key aspects of her human intelligence, and of course the lupine aspects. However, her condition's not supernatural and only a result of her mutant X gene. Sinclair could not only turn into a werewolf-like figure, but also turn into an actual wolf. Of course, she has super enhanced hearing, sight, and smell, which is all similar to that of a wolf, but also superior in nature. She also gets greatly increased reflex, agility, and strength, along with fangs and razor-sharp talons and quite bestial instincts. She can also see through the ultraviolet and infrared spectrums, which allows her to see through heat patterns even in the dark. In fact, later on, thanks to Mother Vine, she got the ability to transform her werewolf form into 5 smaller wolves instead of being one big one. While we're on the subject, let's talk about another X-Factor guy.
Well done, but I only need one of me.
Multiple Man. Much of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man's arc is similar to Wolfsbane, so there's really no point getting into what went on in the initial episodes, else I'd just be repeating myself. However, after Cable failed to kill the resurrected Gambit, X-Force had fallen apart, and only Cable, Psylocke, and Archangel remained. This is when Valerie Cooper and her team, including Multiple Man, approached X-Force with the proposal of an alliance. This happened in the 8th episode, and in episode 9, Madrox found himself fighting Gambit. X-Factor and the remaining members of X-Force attacked X-Corp because Cable believed Gambit had to die before Apocalypse took permanent control of him. Multiple Man and Siren fought Polaris and Bishop, while his duplicates gave X-Factor the numerical advantage. Gambit then regained consciousness and joined the fight. He quickly defeated Wolfsbane and Strong Guy, but Madrox caused more trouble because he flooded the area with his many duplicates. Gambit eventually charged his cards and knocked the copies together, which forced them to merge back into one Madrox. This is where we can see Madrox's powers in all their subdued glory, in the sense that he could create a large number of physical copies that acted independently and attacked from different directions. However, it also exposed a strange contradiction. His duplicates traditionally emerged through kinetic impact, which meant Gambit's explosive attacks should arguably have produced even more copies. Instead, those attacks removed them. However, Season 2 left out almost everything that made Madrox interesting. The comics explored duplicates who developed separate personalities, gained their own experiences, and sometimes rebelled against the original. Madrox could later absorb their memories and skills, which allowed him to send copies around the world and effectively live several lives at once. He also became a licensed investigator who founded X-Factor Investigations and even hired Strong Guy as his bodyguard and Wolfsbane as his assistant, while his first assignment was tracking down the murder of one of his duplicates at the hands of Clay, another being who could create duplicates of himself. Of course, none of this was made part of X-Men 97. His friendship with Strong Guy got a little to no attention, while his humor, intelligence, and internal conflicts with the duplicates were also pretty much absent. Glob Herman. There's really little that the show has offered on Robert Herman, aka Glob Herman. All we know is that he was among the kids who got captured by X-Factor and were rescued with the combined help of Jubilee and Polaris, only to be taken to the X-Mansion, where he was seen along with the other rescued kids like Kid Omega. It was indeed interesting because Kid Omega eventually starts a team that does all kinds of bad things to those who hate mutants, and Glob Herman was a part of this team. Oh, and it was these guys who would go on to refer to themselves as the New X-Men. In the comics, Robert Herman grew up under a father who hated mutants, and this man would take his son to anti-mutant protests, or force him rather. And this is how Robert developed prejudice very early in his life. However, everything changed once Robert's own mutation manifested. His body transformed into transparent bioparaffin wax, which left his skeleton visible beneath the surface. And as a result of this, his father started hating him, and the man ultimately turned against the boy. One night, Robert's mother woke him and drove him to Westchester, where Charles Xavier had established his school for mutants. She left Robert there after she kissed his forehead and told him never to call home. Although the school eventually gave him the home that his family had denied him, the goodbye between mother and son was a tough one. Robert went by Glob at Xavier's school, but that didn't mean that the hatred his father had taught him faded immediately. At first, he despised the place and the mutants around him, but eventually he did accept that he belonged here at Xavier's School for the Gifted. And as for his hatred and anger, it didn't disappear, it only found a new target. And that is all those who hated mutants, including his father. Glob's wax body gave him superhuman durability and made him highly resistant to injury. Fire couldn't harm him, and neither could a bomb. He could also set his wax ablaze before he hurled pieces of himself at enemies. Furthermore, Glob could cover other people with his wax, which appeared to protect them or help preserve their memories. Glob often fought people who hated and feared mutants, especially the members of the coalition called Humanity Now, as well as Ahab, the mutant hunter who traveled through time. However, the Purifiers once manipulated Glob into detonating a bomb inside his school. But although he set off the device, he chose an area where the explosion would harm nobody. I don't think Glob will have any major role in the third season of the new X-Men show, but that could eventually change.
Not even by these insects.
Omega Red. In the 5th episode, which basically served as a standalone episode to show how Wolverine got his claws back, he took Morph, Sabretooth, Lady Deathstrike, Maverick, and Garrison Kane to a deserted Weapon X base in Canada. Logan fooled them by saying they were going there to stop fresh experiments on mutants. But in reality, he only wanted the facility's adamantium chamber so that he could restore the metal to his bones that Magneto had previously ripped out of his body. The group discovered that Weapon X had experimented on the Brood after one of their vessels had reached Earth, and those tests had gone very badly, because the Brood had infected the facility staff and local wildlife. Kane died before the team could even enter the base, while Brood-infected Wolverine later killed Maverick. Morph, Sabretooth, and Deathstrike eventually found Omega Red sedated inside a stasis chamber near the adamantium bonding room. By now, Wolverine had also become infected by the Brood, and this Brood Wolverine attacked them and accidentally freed Arcady, who immediately fought Logan. For a brief moment, Omega Red became an accidental ally because he engaged the Brood Wolverine long enough for the others to escape. That alliance lasted about as long as you would expect from Omega Red. He later forced his way into the bonding room and killed dozens of Brood with his carbonadium coils. However, he then attacked Morph and Lady Deathstrike because he intended to release the creatures upon Earth and purify the planet. Unfortunately for Arcady, Wolverine emerged from the chamber without his Brood infection and with adamantium restored to his skeleton. Logan tore through the remaining creatures before he defeated Omega Red and sent him back to the facility's wreckage. Wolverine's group escaped aboard a jet mere moments before the base exploded. As you can see, Omega Red wasn't really connected to either Apocalypse or the whole time travel plot that happened in the first 4 episodes of the show. More importantly, the episode recreated much of the character's mix from Omega Red's first comic book storyline. His debut arc in X-Men Volume 2 issues 4 through 7 was about Wolverine's past with Team X, which included Sabretooth and Maverick. Episode 5 reunited those characters and put them in with Omega Red at another secret weapons facility. The series retained Arcady's familiar abilities as well. For instance, his carbonadium coils served as effective weapons and were potent enough to restrain even Wolverine, while his strength and durability allowed him to slaughter several Brood. In the comics, he could also emit lethal death spores and absorb life force through his coils. He originally required a carbonadium synthesizer to control his condition, but Season 2 didn't bother itself with all that. Doop. After the X-Men returned to their own time, Charles Xavier reopened the School for Gifted Youngsters and appointed Storm as its new headmistress. He welcomed a class filled with characters from several generations of X-Men comics, which included the likes of Kid Omega, Dust, and Glob, all of whom appear on this list. Doop can be seen toward the back of the student group in his familiar form, a small green creature suspended in the air. But if you aren't really familiar with the comics, it would be difficult to make him out from that one brief appearance that he made. Xavier's welcome was interrupted, however, when Sentinels attacked the mansion, but in fact, the assault was simply a Danger Room exercise. And as you know, Danger Room was gaining sentience. Doop debuted in X-Force number 116 in 2001 and was created by Peter Milligan and Mike Allred. He became the cameraman for the new X-Force team, whose members behaved more like media celebrities than traditional heroes. Doop recorded their missions for television, while his strange language appeared through the special symbols that several teammates somehow understood. The group later adopted the name X-Statix, and Doop was one of its core members. Interestingly enough, his bizarre appearance disguised the fact that he was remarkably powerful and far more competent than most of his attention-hungry teammates. Furthermore, the character formed an unlikely friendship with Wolverine, so much so that Logan recruited him as an adjunct staff member of the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, where Doop officially worked as a receptionist and general employee. But the thing is, secretly, he was protecting the school from threats and villains that the other X-Men never saw coming or even noticed. That's Doop for you. Oh, and in the comics, it was a Doop-like creature named Dap that brought Polaris to Apocalypse before she was made his Horseman of Pestilence.
How many X-Men does it take to find an exit to their torture chamber?
Quentin Quire, or Kid Omega. Quentin made his animated debut in Episode 2, alongside Monet St. Croix, Wing, Jill, and Mark. The young mutants raced towards the X-Mansion because they thought it would be a safe haven for them, only to discover it was nothing more than an abandoned building after the X-Men had vanished into the future and the past. Unfortunately, X-Factor arrived soon afterward and took them into custody. Anyway, we know that Jubilee helped them and the others escape the X-Factor facility, and although he didn't have much dialogue, we know it was him through his Magneto was right t-shirt. In fact, his other clothes were inspired from a Russell Dodderman design of the cover of Mighty Thor number 18 from 2017, although the colors were changed for the series. Then the whole Danger Room thing happened, where he said the line, "My editor played for you" at the beginning of the century. He finally went on to make another cameo during the final episode's epilogue. Professor X held an outdoor class attended by Quentin, Artie, and several other young mutants, while Polaris and Bishop were nearby. Quentin debuted in New X-Men number 134 in January 2003, which meant that his appearance in this second season, which is still set in 1997, has been deliberately borrowed from a later comic era. Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely created him as Xavier's brilliant yet disillusioned pupil, while the Magneto was right shirt can be pretty much associated with his rebellion against the school. In the comics, Quentin formed the Omega Gang and used the power-enhancing drug called Kick to become the mastermind of the event called the Riot at Xavier's. As I mentioned earlier, Glob Herman joined that gang, and as unfortunate as it may sound, Quentin's obsession with Sophie Cuckoo ended up with her death. I think the ingredients for a loose Riot at Xavier's adaptation have already been placed with great subtlety and care. You see, Quentin has always distrusted authority and figures of authority. He wears Magneto's message across his chest and stays in a school surrounded by mutants who suffered under the government. Grading Creed's election as president can push him much further towards some sort of radical action. But yeah, Quentin is definitely one of the most powerful mutants out there, and despite being a kid, he's already an Omega-level mutant who's also a potential host to the Phoenix Force, much like Jean Grey. Additionally, this kid can do several amazing things, including creating an entire universe within his mind, one where he can imprison others. Clearly, one should not trifle with Kid Omega. Dust. Much of Dust's story is like that of the other rescued mutant kids, so I'm not going to go there, and focus more on the comic book origin story and Strange Powers. Soraya Qadir was a Pashtun Sunni Muslim from Kandahar, Afghanistan, and her mutation allowed her to transform her body into a sand-like substance. Her powers first manifested themselves under horrific circumstances, much like it happens with most other mutants. So, after slavers kidnapped her and attempted to move her in the Niqab, the young girl instinctively transformed into her sand form before killing all her attackers, and eventually, Wolverine and Phantom X rescued her. She later enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Leadership, where young mutants learned how to control their abilities and coexist with humanity. That's where Soraya adopted the identity of Dust, and despite the simple name, her mutation gave her a frightening amount of power. Dust was a transmorph who could convert her entire body into an explosive cloud of sand-like silicone particles. Amazingly enough, she retained control over every particle and could move through the air as a sandstorm. Furthermore, she could maintain a humanoid shape in this form or restore her normal body whenever she chose. Her sand form also protected her from most physical harm because bullets and direct attacks had very little to strike. Even powerful telepaths such as Jean Grey and Professor X found it difficult to detect her while she was dispersed. On top of that, she had resistance to magic. However, Dust was far more than simply a defensive mutant. She could accelerate her particles with enough force to scour flesh from bone, And if she wanted to get especially brutal, she could enter someone's lungs and tear them apart from within. So yeah, underestimating her because of her quiet nature would be a pretty terrible idea. As for her weaknesses, water or ground could disperse or ground her sand form, while powerful air currents could scatter her particles. Extreme heat above roughly 3,400 degrees Fahrenheit could fuse her silicone-based body into glass, but yeah, those aren't really common, so she's a pretty potent mutant in her own right. Magik. So Magik basically appeared in X-Men Season 2 in a flashback in the 7th episode titled Strange Land, Strange Heart. The story goes back to the Genosha Massacre from Season 1 to reveal that Colossus, her brother, had fought alongside with Illyana during the attack. And her name is Illyana Rasputin, by the way. As Magik, she wore a yellow and black and New Mutants uniform and helped rescue civilians while they fought the Wild Sentinel. However, the machine caught her in a blast and killed her. Colossus was obviously distraught after her death, and because of this, he basically left the X-Men to join Exodus's acolytes. When the team reached their Savage Land base, he revealed a shrine dedicated to Illyana, Magneto, and the other mutants who had died. However, Nightcrawler eventually helped him rediscover his path and showed him the acolytes for who they really were. However, this was technically not the first time that we saw Illyana, although it was the first time we saw her adult form. A child version appeared in the original X-Men the Animated Series, but her mutant abilities hadn't developed yet. The animated series borrowed Illyana's death and Colossus's response to it from the comics, but it changed the cause. In Uncanny X-Men number 303 in 1993, a de-aged Illyana died from the legacy virus. Her death shattered Peter's faith in Charles Xavier's dream, after which he joined Magneto's acolytes. Comic Magik eventually returned through Limbo and became a major X-Man again, which means the animated version could theoretically follow a similar path. Her actual mutant ability allows her to create circular portals called stepping discs. These portals can carry people or objects through Limbo before depositing them elsewhere. She could also cross continents and planets, while some stories allowed her to travel through time. Belasco abducted Illyana as a child and trapped her in Limbo, where 7 years passed for her while almost no time passed on Earth. Belasco taught her black magic, while an alternate version of Storm trained her in white magic. Illyana later studied under Doctor Strange, which expanded her knowledge far beyond her mutant gift. Illyana also created the Soul Sword from her own soul and life force. She could summon it whenever she needed it. The blade could disrupt spells, magical creatures, and mystical constructs. It traditionally passed through ordinary people without physical harm, although later comics allowed it to hurt psychic beings, other physical targets, and even sentinels. Furthermore, the more Illyana uses the Soul Sword and her magic, the more mystical armor forms around her body. It protects her from physical and magical attacks while also increasing her strength. And if that's not all, she also has a demonic form called Darkchild. Candra. Candra used to be a priestess and advisor in Pharaoh Ramatut's court around 3000 BCE. When Ensabanura was about to attack with his sandstormers, she warned Ramatut about the attack. Next, she has a small conversation with Ramatut in the 4th episode, before appearing for the last time in the 8th episode, where it was revealed that she used to be Ensabanura's lover. More like he loved her, but she didn't, on account of what he did to her people. She persuaded him to place part of his power inside a gem, which granted her immortality. However, she later betrayed Apocalypse and escaped. Candra eventually traveled to Louisiana and became the mysterious External who ruled over the Thieves and Assassins guilds. In fact, she even appeared in the 1993 episode Externally Yours. Here, it was revealed that she appeared every 10 years before the two guilds and demanded a tithe, after which she chose one faction to receive her power and protection. Belladonna attempted to deceive her by sabotaging the Thieves Guild's offering, but Jean Grey exposed the plot and Belladonna would have lost her life had it not been for Gambit, who persuaded the External to remove Belladonna's powers instead of killing her. Anyway, after Apocalypse resurrected Gambit's death, Remy returned to Louisiana and seized control of both guilds. He then kidnapped Rogue and proposed a very strange version of marriage, one in which he would steal Candra's relic, make Rogue immortal, and remain with her forever. And in order to do this, he summoned Candra, killed her, and took her gem, which he then gave away to Rogue. But when Rogue entered Isan's celestial shrine, he removed the relic's power from her. In the comics as well, she was an External, a small group of ancient mutants who possessed immortality and shared a psychic connection, with each of these representing an idea. For instance, Candra represents guile, whereas Apocalypse represents evolution, not destruction. But yeah, there was no romance between these two. In fact, if at all, they wanted to show that Apocalypse had a romantic interest, Genesis would have been a stronger candidate, having been his wife once upon a time, and also the woman who had 4 children with him, who would go on to become his first set of horsemen. Strong Guy. Guido Carosella, aka Strong Guy, was basically X-Factor's muscle. In Survival of the Fittest, X-Factor and X-Force attacked X-Corp's headquarters with support from a SHIELD helicarrier and Sentinel Squad 1 troops, and Strong Guy finally got to show his abilities when he fought Bishop. But it was quite the standoff because both mutants absorbed kinetic force. This only meant that every punch, every kick, and every blow gave the other more power and neither man could gain a real advantage. Guido later joined Multiple Man, Wolfsbane, and Siren against the Bishop and former teammate Polaris. But yeah, X-Factor couldn't win. Guido's mutation helps his body absorb kinetic energy from punches, collisions, and explosions, and this kinetic energy then empowers his muscle mass as well as enhances his sheer physical power. However, Guido can only retain excess energy for about 90 seconds. He has to release it through physical force or else it can permanently alter his body. This man's mutation first activated after school bullies attacked him and a bus struck him, but he failed to discharge the energy in time. As a result, his upper body became permanently enlarged and disproportionate. So if you're wondering why he looks the way he looks, there's your answer. At peak strength, Guido can move the Blob and even trade blows with the Hulk. Contrary to what you may believe, Guido's not all brawn and no brains. This man is a gifted intellect who also has a drama degree from New York University. So I guess if he wasn't doing mutant things, he would have been an actor. But yeah, in the comics, he also killed Wolfsbane's son, Tyr. With Graydon Creed now president, I'm not sure if Strong Guy will continue to stay with X-Factor. In fact, Mystica's also come into the picture, so the future of X-Factor now looks especially dark. Alright folks, that's all for this one. If you liked the video, please hit like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any more of our marvelous videos. Stay safe and have a good one, and as always, stay marvelous.